So I'm happy to say that we are joined today by my colleague Rebecca Bestinghager, who works for ICLEI and also leads the Urban Transitions Alliance Secretariat. We have Angier from the German Energy Agency, or the DENA. We have Bogner from the city of Katowice. We are very honored to have Christian Melutat from Innogy, who is one of our guest presenters today. Christian Nele, Dirk van Bracht, and Michael Leichner from the city of Dortmund. We have my colleague Cale Roberts from ICLEI USA, Jonathan Gordon from Newark, who is our latest ICLEI member, another colleague, Josephine Hintz from ICLEI Europe, who will be sharing some of her work on sustainable and socially responsible public procurement on today's webinar. We have Kelly St. John from the city of Buffalo, and Lisa from the city of Turku. And Ollie from the city of Cincinnati, as well as Rich DeClaudio from Pittsburgh, and Sebastian from Essen, who's just made it. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sarah. Sarah, are you okay to share your screen with us?
I should be able to. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. It's great to be with everyone. As mentioned, my name is Sarah. I'm the Climate and Energy Planner with the City of Pittsburgh. So I've been focused a lot on kind of our climate action plan, but then specifically some of our work within the energy sector. And as was mentioned, getting the city to that 100% renewable energy goal by 2030. So I'm just going to start kind of as a background and introduction to the city of Pittsburgh. For those of you who may not be familiar, Pittsburgh is known kind of as the steel industry city. We peaked in the 50s and 60s. We had a population close to 670,000 people, and nearly half of the US-based steel was produced here locally. This led to a lot of economic boom, a lot of job creation, and a lot of growth, but then also, as you can see on the picture kind of on the left, a lot of pollution, and we were referred to as hell with the lid off due to the poor air quality and all of the air pollution from all of that steel industry. So when there was a big shift in kind of where that steel production was happening, a lot of in the 70s and 80s, a lot of the steel production moved out of the city of Pittsburgh. And because that was the basis of a lot of our economy, there was a huge crash in the economy in the city. And then we also lost a lot of the population here locally. So there's been a big effort in the past 20 years or so to really rebound and rebuild the city. And we've now got a population just over 300,000. So still less than half of what we were at when we had that kind of population peak. And we haven't quite started growing yet, but predicts that in the next few years, we will begin to see some of that population start to increase again. Where we used to be the steel city, we now are known for kind of our healthcare, technology, and finance industries. And we also have quite a bit of higher education here in Pittsburgh. And so one of the things in this kind of rebound that has been a main priority of past administrations, but especially of our current mayor and current administration, is this idea of Pittsburgh for all. So making sure that as we have this transition into a new economy, what we in our office like to focus on is kind of the green economy, that we have that focus on Pittsburgh for all, that we're bringing along all of our residents in this new economy and this new growth. And so there has been a lot of work kind of already done again over the past 20 years or so on cleaning up the rivers, improving air quality, improving kind of the overall general health and well-being in the city of Pittsburgh. So we've seen a lot of progress, but of course, as we have our climate goals and have a lot of these resilience goals laid out, we want to make sure that we're continuing to focus on kind of those social justice aspects, as well as some of our climate and environmental goals. So for a little bit of just overview of kind of our office, we are within the Department of City Planning, and then we specifically are the Sustainability and Resilience Office. And so that really formed out of Pittsburgh being selected as one of the 100 resilient cities through the Rockefeller Foundation. And through that partnership with the Rockefeller Foundation, we did kind of this analysis of what our shocks and stressors are within the city of Pittsburgh, and then have developed a number of strategies and plans that have kind of fed out of that. So we, when talking with both residents as well as kind of subject matter experts, we see climate change as being one of the major shocks that people are worried about. So major things that are kind of point in time occurrences, but have a huge impact on the city as a whole. So a lot of people in Pittsburgh are worried about climate change and extreme weather. And then on the stressor side, so kind of these things that are the slow burning issues that are just kind of a part of day-to-day life that often can then turn into shocks. In the stressors, we see a lot of that inequality as an issue, as well as environmental degradation and aging infrastructure. So some of that kind of history as far as the pollution and the steel industries, that environmental degradation is still something that's really relevant today. But then also because of that severe decrease in industry and lack of population, there was a long time where there was lack of funding to invest in infrastructure. So that's something that, again, is really on a lot of people's minds currently, is that they're recognizing that lack of investment that has happened over the past 30 years or so. So this process of kind of engaging with the public, as well as, again, kind of subject matter experts, really was good for us to see where kind of the general feelings are and where there really is that need for improvement and need for action. And so that kind of led to this pathway of different plans and strategies that have been developed through our office. Specifically, the One PGH Resilience Strategy looks at all of the shocks and stressors. It lays out, again, strategies and ways in which to address those shocks and stressors and kind of mitigate their impacts on day-to-day life for our residents, as well as just the city as a whole. The other main thing that we have focused on is the Pittsburgh equity indicators. And I think this was something that, for those of you who are on the last webinar, I think was mentioned quite a bit. The city did this equality indicators that have over 100 indicators of mostly racial disparity within the city of Pittsburgh. And so with these kind of different data points, we see where we really need to be able to focus in order to have that Pittsburgh for all mentality and really bring along all of our residents as we move forward. And so specifically within kind of the climate area, we have a number of goals. Again, that 100% renewable electricity goal, we're looking at 100% fossil fuel free for the city fleet. And then we're also looking to divest city pensions from the fossil fuel industry. Citywide, we're hoping to reduce 50% of energy and water use, and then also achieve zero waste and reduce 50% of on-road transportation emissions. So looking at kind of those shocks and stressors and recognizing that climate change is a major shock that people are worried about, and then the kind of economic security, job security, and racial disparities are major stressors that people are worried about. We're really trying to tie these two things together of how can we achieve these goals and ensure that we're employing local people and having that local economic impact and having, again, kind of those local benefits for all of the city residents. Within our climate action plan, which was passed in 2018, we've broken things down into 6 different chapters: energy generation and distribution, buildings and end use efficiency, transportation and land use, water and resource recovery, waste and resource recovery, sorry, food and agriculture, and then urban ecosystems. So this is the first time that the city of Pittsburgh has taken kind of a holistic look at climate action. Again, kind of leading out of that resilience strategy, we see that there's a lot of overlap between some of these different areas and how they impact our climate and how they impact our emissions, but also just how they impact the city as a whole. And so one thing that we've looked at in kind of laying it out in this structure is how can we prioritize actions that have what we consider to be co-benefits. So specifically looking kind of in that energy sector, and a lot of what we're talking about today, kind of if we're looking at converting to renewable resources, we obviously can expect a huge greenhouse gas emissions reduction and have a huge climate benefit from that. But what are some of the other co-benefits that we can either hope to achieve through those projects or ensure that we're baking into those projects? So one thing we talk about a lot within the energy sector is how can we ensure that if we were to do a large solar project, that it's local workforce that is being trained in that installation and maintenance of the solar panels. Again, to see that local economic benefit and that local job creation. We've also looked at things like what are the air quality impacts of some of these things, because that's something that we see specifically within our minority. Air quality is a big concern and a big health issue. So what are some of these other things beyond just the climate impacts that we can have across all of these different sectors? And so one thing, again, focusing on kind of the topic today, we really see energy as an opportunity. Talking again about co-benefits, there was recently a study done by the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy that shows in Pittsburgh specifically, if we were to reduce 15% of our energy use across the city, it would translate to $200 a year in annual healthcare cost savings per person. And this was one of the highest. The study looked at a number of different cities throughout the US, and Pittsburgh was one of the highest dollars saved per person for that same relative amount of energy use reduction. So we are able to see directly that there is a direct link between our climate goals and then again that quality of life for the residents of the city of Pittsburgh. And so really showing what we've done over the past 4 years is really being able to show and collect a lot of that data to see where that overlap is. And I think our big push now is how do we really get those projects into action, and how do we really kind of catalyze those actions to ensure that we're seeing these cost savings for people, these health improvements, these job creation, and really seeing the benefits of all these actions that we've laid out in previous strategies. The other thing on this slide is this Sankey diagram that was completed a few years ago now, so it's a little out of date. It was done back in 2011, I believe, that looks at energy across kind of the southwestern Pennsylvania into Ohio and West Virginia, so some of the neighboring states, and just looks at where our energy is coming from and where it's going. We see that in this area specifically, there's still quite a bit of coal being used both for the creation of electricity, but also being exported. And then our renewable resources are still pretty small as far as percentage of our total electricity makeup, our total energy makeup. And so we're really looking at how we can kind of shift things within this graph. We see that there's still a lot of waste. If you look, the right side is kind of the outputs. There's still a lot of unused energy, which is essentially waste. And again, a lot of still kind of dirty energy sources. So this provides a look at how we can really start to analyze where our energy is coming from and where we can start to slice off pieces and convert into some of those more renewable resources and greener resources. And on the other side, we also see that there is kind of that still high percentage of waste. So we also have done a lot to try and look at efficiency specifically within our residential sector here in the city. And the one other kind of study or report that I wanted to highlight was this report we did with Siemens and the University of Pittsburgh that used Siemens City Performance tool to complete an analysis of our climate action plan. And so what we essentially did was ran some of the actions that we've laid out within the climate action plan and some of these other studies through this city performance tool. And we see what, again, those projected impacts across a number of different indicators are. So we see a lot of ability within that renewable sector to have that greenhouse gas reduction, which is our main goal in our climate action work. But then we also see a lot of air quality improvements from, again, wind and solar, but also a lot of job creation in that area. Of about 30 policies and projects and technologies that we analyzed, we see that rooftop solar is the #1 job creator, or the #1 potential for job creation. So again, looking at how we kind of prioritize projects, being able to have that job creation number is really helpful, especially I think given the current circumstances where we have near record high unemployment rates. The other thing that we're really looking at is how do we take some of this work that's already been laid out and kind of bounce forward post shutdown and post kind of stay-at-home orders and everything like that. How do we not only move forward with this green economy and this work that's already in place, but how do we ensure that when budgets are being cut and there's a lot of tough decisions being made, both within city government, but also the private sector, when there's a lot of people who are in need of jobs, how do we ensure that the jobs are available and the training is available to really move this green economy forward in that Pittsburgh for all mentality. So I think that's kind of our big question is we know the jobs are out there, we know the potential to create jobs, but it's that how do we build upon existing partnerships. Rich is on the line, I believe, from the Energy Innovation Center, which is a local technology and training facility that has done a lot of great work in this area of getting people job ready. We've partnered a lot with some of our local universities around some of this studies and data collection and research, but then also how do we translate that into, again, that job creation for city residents and that training for our local economy. So I think that was kind of high level of the introduction to the city of Pittsburgh and what we've been working on and kind of what our big question I think is in that job creation and economy piece. But I think I saw a couple questions.
Yeah, Sarah, we have 2 questions so far. One is from Tina from the city of Turku. She wants to know kind of how far you've gotten when it comes to meeting your renewable energy and sustainability goals that you mentioned a few slides back. And Kelly would be interested to know what ICLEI study you participated in.
Yeah, for the ICLEI study, I'm gonna blank on the name of it off the top of my head, but it was essentially it was city energy efficiency, so looking at just strictly energy efficiency within cities and what the potential impacts of just efficiency and just reducing energy use would have on kind of cost and emissions and healthcare. I can pull up that. I can I know I have it saved. I can pull up that study and share it with the group if that's of interest. And then on the progress side, so one thing that actually happened just yesterday, we passed through council a resolution to enter into a contract for a 1-year electricity supply for the city of Pittsburgh for our utilities, and then the utilities for what's called the Western Pennsylvania Energy Consortium. So the city of Pittsburgh buys our electricity through the consortium, which is a group of about 30 entities that are other public entities, our parking authority, the Allegheny County, the zoo here in Pittsburgh, and then a lot of nonprofits as well. So kind of that public nonprofit sector. We have an aggregated purchase that in the past was just geared at getting cheaper electricity, but now we're really using it as a mechanism to aggregate and also do more renewables. So we actually just yesterday were approved to do a 1-year contract that has covered our accounts 100% with renewable energy credits. So we see that as a big win in that getting to 100% renewable goal, where for accounting purposes, we kind of have achieved that 100% goal, but we see that as kind of a stepping stone. We really don't want to rely on those national renewable energy credits because we don't see those other co-benefits like the economic benefits, the local job creation, and the local air quality improvement. So on one side, we've kind of checked a box there, and it's given us a little bit more time to pursue more local projects in the renewable space. We do have a number of projects on city facilities that we're currently kind of in the early stages of doing analysis for. And then we're also looking at some grid scale power purchase agreements. So the other benefit, and this is just on the city side or the kind of municipal side, we're also looking at using that energy consortium to do some grid scale and large scale power purchase agreements. Again, because we have that aggregated load, we are able to get more reasonable prices and balance out kind of the cheaper prices that we get just from the straight market for our base load, and then balance that out with what may be a little bit of a premium to do a power purchase agreement for solar or wind, and balance those out to still have the budgetary concerns addressed as far as how we're spending city dollars, but also get, again, some of those more local benefits for more tangible renewable projects. As far
That
as
sounds great, Sarah. I just wanted to also to bring us back to the challenge topic. Obviously, Pittsburgh, when you had your industrial boom, you attracted a lot of residents that had heavy industry and manufacturing expertise. Now that you're looking to sort of advance your renewable energy sector and have those jobs be based locally and to create local economic opportunities, what are the skills do you feel are sort of missing from the local population? And have you done any projects, for example, working for the Energy Innovation Center to kind of create training opportunities to deliver those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great question. And Rich, feel free to chime in if you have any opinions from the Energy Innovation Center. I think one of the things is where there was that shift from kind of the industrial workforce to this more technology-based and healthcare-based workforce, there is a little bit of a lack in that industrial skills then, or the kind of hands-on skills. A lot of the people that we're attracting to the city of Pittsburgh and a lot of the new residents that we see moving in are coming to work for Google and Uber. We have a large kind of robotics contingency in the city of Pittsburgh due to the work happening at Carnegie Mellon University. There has been kind of that shift from some of the more vocational jobs and that type of training to more technology and medicine based. That's not to say that there aren't still people interested in doing that work and there aren't still skilled laborers there. But as citywide, I think there's a little bit of a gap in some of that training in those facilities.
And Sarah, if I could just comment briefly, thank you for including the Energy Innovation Center Institute in this important activity. I would absolutely agree with Sarah says, but add to that, since we tend to focus our workforce development activities on that gap population, connecting the more vulnerable members of the regional community, not just in Pittsburgh, but surrounding Pittsburgh, to the job opportunities, particularly ones with good career ladders and some running room, if you will, has been our mission since our founding about 5 years ago. And we're now tracking employer-led kind of 3 to 6 week training programs with industry accepted curriculums and cohorts of 20 to 30 people each. We're probably graduating about 300 to 400 people a year. Many of them, over 71%, are first-time employed members of their family. And there is a significant desire in this population as we are one of the handful of organizations that try to address this particular gap, but with a particular emphasis on energy and particularly sustainable low carbon energy. We think that there is really a large pent up skill for men and women to enter, particularly our minority populations, but just any vulnerable population in the region, to enter into job training to start taking these jobs. Because in many ways, Sarah, we see these opportunities as a nexus between the old economy, the old kind of dirty steel mill jobs from the very first picture you had up on the first slide, to the tech sector by the sheer fact that a lot of these jobs are going to require a significant amount of tech competencies, and as you grow in each of these job classes and move up the ladder, you'll need more tech competencies. So it's a really interesting nexus. A lot of the pathways are still unclear and still being developed, and some of them will be blank dead ends. But we're really very we're very optimistic about the opportunity as the city embraces rapidly, a low carbon, zero carbon energy power system citywide and region-wide, that there is going to be plenty of men and women that'll be ready to take these jobs as they become available.
That sounds great, Rich. And I think in terms of identifying these pathways and identifying good cooperation models is definitely the point of this webinar. So I think it would be a great sort of step to now move on to a series of presentations from our guest presenters and experts who have experience actually working on this particular topic in a broad, different way. And so my first presenter, I'd like to introduce Christian Melutat, who is based in Germany, in Essen, who is the head of Competence Center for Apprenticeship at Innogy, to share a little bit how, as a private energy and renewable energy company, how they work with Germany's vocational education system to create opportunities and to develop workforce and skills for the renewable energy sector. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Christian. Can I share your screen?
Yes, wait a minute.
Perfect, we can see it.
So, okay, brilliant. So hello, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. First, I would like to tell you that my company, innogy, is in the added value of the electricity, is responsible for the grid area and the sales area, not for the renewables. But I guess that the things which we get discussed is close to the renewable energy sector. So, yeah, first of all, I would like to tell you something about our dual system in Germany, and after that, I would like to tell you something our apprenticeship in innogy and E.ON. That is our company now. There is a merger at the moment. I was innogy, and in some weeks I'm part of the E.ON of the merger process. So first, just some information about me. Please call me Christian. Well, I grew up in West Berlin, studied business and management, and now I'm 24 years in the company. And my position is head of competence center apprenticeship. And I was an apprentice as well when I finished my school. And what it is and how it works, that is exactly my point or my presentation today. First, let us start just to give a short overview about the dual system. And in that case, it's pretty important to see how does a school career system in Germany works. For the first years, we call it primary school. Then we have another, for 5 or 6 years, the secondary school. And after that part, you get a degree
Can
for.
I quickly interrupt you and just let you know that we're not seeing, I think, the correct slide. We're still on your introduction slide.
Oh, the introduction slide. I can see it. Do you see that? It was my introduction slide. Okay. And now I will go further to the school career. Do you see that now?
No, not yet. I think maybe just to save time, I will open up your presentation and maybe click through it. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Then I finish it again.
Great. So maybe start. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect.
But yeah, that's exactly brilliant. So so I start again. So first years it's a primary school, and then additional 5 or 6 years you get a recommendation for the secondary school, and for a longer school career, which is necessary to go to the university. And to start a kind of apprenticeship, you need the degree from the secondary school. That is important to know. Yeah, can you switch to the next slide, please? Yeah, brilliant. If we speak about the dual training, there are 3 partners who share the responsibility. It's first the company. We conclude the contract with a young apprentice. They get around about 1,000 euro per month. That's important to know. And the company, or we are responsible for the practical content. And normally they do 3 days per week, or we do the work 3 days per week in our company. And we, of course, provide the workplace. If it's more an office job, it's in the company. And if it's more a technical apprenticeship, we have special training center where we have these workbench, welding equipment, electronic devices, etc. And then on the other hand, there's a vocational school, the part 2. The young boys and girls are 2 weeks per week in the school, and the school teaches the theoretical knowledge about the special topics like electrical engineering or accounting, or some general subjects like German, English, etc. And then we have a third part, is the Chamber of Commerce and Industrial. They does the examination. So 3 parts share the responsibility. Yeah, that is important to know in Germany. Next slide, please. Sorry. Yeah, a short overview about the goal and facts. Would like to start on the right side. In Germany, 60% of the school leavers decide to start this kind of dual training. We have in Germany around about more than 300 training occupations. It is really difficult to have an overview. And each year we have more than 500,000 new starter, not we in innogy in Germany, I mean, in 2018, and around about it's 1.3 million German apprentices we had in 2018, and the time for apprenticeship time is 2 or 3.5 years. Yeah. And sorry, and what you see now, we came to the left side, the goals. What's the goal of these kind of training? To get a vocational competence, which mean in the middle the specialized skills like electrical engineering or accounting or stuff like that. Some methodical competence, ability to plan, supervise work independently, and some social skills to interact with colleagues, customers, etc. Next slide, please. Overall, it's in Germany, this kind of dual training after the school is highly accepted. And why? I wrote some points there. For the company, we got people with a good performance. There exists a high loyalty to the company. It reduced costs for settling in, and some other points. For the apprentices, they get a very practical orientation. They get a monthly salary, and in the end, they get a certificate. And for the society, it's important that they reduce the youth unemployment and the social integration, and it's good for the economic productivity. Yeah. Next slide, please. Now I would like to show you how it works in our company. It's one of our famous persons. So in innogy and E.ON in Germany, we have these kind of dual training in 14 federal states from 15. So we are not just one company. We have a lot of subsidiaries there. So and we have this kind of dual training in 30 companies in the group. And 61 locations in Germany, from the north to the south and west to the east. Altogether, in the end of the year 2019, we had around about 2,500 apprentices. Most of them are male and 20% female. Why? Because we are a grid company, and there are more the technical apprentices. Apprenticeship is more famous, very famous, and we hire each year 650 young people. Yes. Next slide, and I think that's the last. So in the end, what kind of occupations do we offer? We have the industrial, we have some commercial occupations in the IT sector, gastronomic as well, and the industrial technical part. And the industrial technical part is the most popular, and there we speak about the electronic techniken for industrial engineering. That was my translation of Elektroniker für Betriebstechnik. And these Elektroniker for Betriebstechnik install, they take care of and repair the operating system, production, process plants, etc. So I'm sorry, I'm not from the technical part, I'm more from the commercial part. So I have a lot of colleagues that are closer to that topic. And yeah, so that is the overview about our occupations. And I think that was the last. Yeah, I had 10 minutes, so I tried to give you a short overview about the dual system in Germany and what we offer in our company. And I hope you get a short overview in that 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christian. And it's great to see the role that the private company can play when it comes to actually addressing the skill shortage and using existing staff as a way to train up and coming youths who want to join different aspects of the energy profession. It's not just, like you said, about the technical and engineering side. There's also big opportunities when it comes to also commercial development and IT. I would like to just note to everybody that unfortunately Christian will not be able to stay with us until the end. So if there's any direct questions you would like to ask him, please feel free to do so now. We already have one question, but I think this is more a question for Rich. It's from Michael Forrester, the energy manager at Cincinnati. Can anyone help describe the difference between this and the union apprenticeship programs in the US? Similar or different? Rich, do you want to give us a quick introduction to union apprenticeship programs and what the synergies or differences are between the two?
Yeah, give you insights. A couple different kind of description. One is the unions have a role in the utility industry. And, there's I think almost all electric utility employees are unionized, but in Pennsylvania anyway, more than 70% of the employers are contractors, and almost none of them are unionized. And so there's a real bifurcation on training. In my experience, the union training in the United States can be among the best there is. It's very rigorous and very well thought out, but it's not made available to non-union members. And even in Pennsylvania, and even in Pittsburgh, which is a very heavy union city, the majority of work is still not done by union employees. So there's a gap need that the unions, aren't necessarily designed to fill. And so I think it creates lots of opportunities for organizations like ours. And we've done quite a bit of training for unions. And our negotiations to do some electric utility training for both union and non-union workers right now. There are like lines of demarcation where, in my experience, at least in this region, where the unions don't want to spend much time training men and women that could end up filling non-union jobs. So there's a pretty big gap. Anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rich. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Please feel free to unmute yourselves.
I would like to ask a question from the city of Dortmund. Thank you, Mr. Meideltat, for the presentation. It was very interesting, but I have a question in another direction. In Germany, we lost about 100 jobs in the last 10 years in the photovoltaic branch. And in the last 2 years, we lost about 40,000 jobs in the wind mill branch. So what is the impact of your educational system in this case?
Yeah, that was my my first the first thing what I said. We are close to we are in this added value. We are responsible for the grid area and the sales area, not for the renewables. So the renewables area it's another company. It's the RWE. So I can't really tell you what is the impact. But of course, if the I guess that there is an increase of the places which they offer to the young people. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So, but I can't really tell you some numbers for that. Sorry.
Okay, we have a second question from Rebecca in the chat. Does Innogy's apprenticeship program only open for sort of young, recent graduates from secondary school, or is there also an opportunity for older members of society or long-term unemployed people to also register for the apprenticeship?
Yeah, you can do both. If you are on the upper school, you have this vocational diploma. You can make a dual training as well. But most of the young people at the moment in Germany like to go to the university. There are some people who start with this kind of apprenticeship, and I made these. I made a diploma, but then I start with an apprenticeship, and I made these in a advertising agency. And after that, I saw, okay, the really interesting jobs and things to do. You need this kind of a diploma from the university. Then I went to the university, and after that, I went into the company again. So the apprenticeship is open for each person. So from the upper school or the secondary school. Yeah.
But also for like for example, older members of society, so people who are already say 40 or 50, who've already had a different career and would like to move into the energy sector.
Yeah, I think then I have to take a look into the Gesetz. There exists a barrier. I think it's 29 or stuff like that. Yeah. Mm.
Great. Yeah, so with that,
Yeah.
I'd like, and also just conscious of time, I'd like to move on to our second presentation and introduce my colleague, Josephine Hens, who works on sustainable economy and procurement with ICLEI Europe, to share a little bit about how cities can use socially responsible procurement to generate both inclusive job opportunities and also to address societal needs and look for local governments. So Josephine, I'm going to let you share your screen.
Okay, I say goodbye and have a nice meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us, Christian, and have a good
Thank
afternoon.
you. Thanks.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Josephine. I'm based in ICLEI Europe Secretariat in Freiburg in Germany. I'm with ICLEI since 1.5 years. And yeah, can you share see my screen well?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, I'm really excited to share a bit our perspective, and based on the presentation before, I'm really gonna now switch to the side of public authorities and to look at the perspective of sustainable procurement. So when there is a contract that needs to be drawn up, if there is a need from the city to buy new products and services, to kind of put the perspective of workforce development into that, so leveraging that angle. Yeah, ICLEI, we have been working in the field, and can you just briefly tell me if you see the slides moving?
No, at the moment we can't. Have you enlarged to start the slideshow? That could help.
Yeah, I did that. It says something like paused. You can only see the pause there. So maybe can you share the PDF version then? Maybe that's easier again.
Sure thing.
All right, sorry for that. All right, I'm just gonna continue, and Hannah, you can draw up the presentation. That would be great. So from our perspective, in sustainable public procurement, there is a case to make for cities to have a responsibility for the social side of things, and within that, workforce development. And actually, in that regard, if you go to the next one, from our perspective, public buyers have this leverage. So it's about employment opportunities, but it's also addressing through that social inclusion, ethical trade. So really, public buyers have a responsibility that is, of course, local, but it also can span across the supply chain. So just to put that into that as well. Now, also locally, it's not only about those using public services, but also those involved in perhaps local production and delivery, and also the staff that's part of the buying organization. And also important to point out is that through socially responsible procurement, there is an influence to address the market, to change the market. So we don't see it as a one-off thing or as one policy, but actually as a relationship building exercise together with industry. And for the next few slides, I'm going to concentrate on the EU context, also to make you aware of that. We have the EU public procurement directives that enable to look at the whole procurement cycle and not only make decisions so based on price, but actually to award the most economically advantageous tender. So that can take into account actually the quality, and that can take into account social considerations. And just as a broad brush, we are seeing public buyers across Europe to take up this approach, but it's not yet mainstream. So also specifically in the renewable energy field, this is not practiced throughout the bar. It's slowly being taken up. So this is quite cutting edge as well. And yeah, if you go to the next slide, I will share a few examples now on workforce development. The first one, I think, will focus on renewable energy, but the others will also draw from a few different sectors to also get that inspiration to potentially learn from that. All right, so how could local workforce development be fostered through procurement? Let's have a look at Rotterdam. So they have been focusing on supporting local energy initiatives. They have just, as of January this year, awarded a contract, a 10-year framework agreement for local renewable energy supply, having the same ambition as Pittsburgh, with getting 100% of the city's electricity from renewables, namely solar and wind energy. And from that also, so it's not only the source being renewable, but also the ambition to have it 100% local. And of that, not local meaning really being produced, being generated in Rotterdam, at least half of it. And they have leveraged award criteria. They have specified that they want their suppliers to take into account, like they want to activate the public, to involve the public, and to empower local energy projects. All right, next one. Another approach that we identified is in Aarhus in Denmark, and they have been focusing on employment training. And there was a framework agreement for sewage services, so different sector now. And they have basically done a market dialogue. So before you're publishing a tender, they have engaged with the market, with the local industry, and together identified, all right, if we want to create training opportunities and develop a skilled workforce, let's look at apprenticeships, let's look at training. So this would be a good way in, and also to put it as an award criteria. For those, maybe some of you are not that familiar with the procurement language here, award criteria means that it's an criterion where it's not mandatory if you're submitting a bid, but you get extra points if you meet it. So, and in this case, it's quite interesting looking at the results of this example, is that because the bids were so similar in their price offer, the actual award criteria on employment training was the deciding factor. So those suppliers that had it as part of the application actually got the contract awarded. And so the second point here in the results being this was a strong signaling effect also to the unsuccessful bidders, that this is really something the municipality is seeking towards. All right, let's go to the next one. So the next couple two, the next two will focus on how to ensure good quality jobs that provide opportunities for residents in need. And here the example is in France, in the Département of Île-de-Vilaine. And they've done this by focusing on work integration clauses. So this is all about how can we streamline social integration, workforce development through public procurement. And they have actually, and I find this quite interesting as well, they have this target. So they're actually having a lot of policy work behind this to reach a certain amount of hours, 70,000 hours of annual work in public contracts through this integration of social clauses. And they've already met this in 2018. So their approach seems to be quite successful in that sense. And one of the examples on how they were able to meet this was they had the need to build 3 new schools. So again, different sector, construction industry, and they divided this into 52 lots, which is quite a lot of like small lots, and 28 of those included these mandatory contract performance clauses requiring the employment of people meeting particular difficulties of integration. Now I'm gonna, in the next slide, I'm gonna talk about that, what that means, because they defined, I think that's also an important point, to define what does it actually mean, like what's our understanding of people in need for integration, because that may differ as well from the context. Now, here they included long-term job seekers, workers with disabilities, as well as young people that have a certain educational level. If to just go back to the previous slide. Here we are talking about mandatory contract performance clauses. So this is not something that gets additional points if it's addressed, but it's actually mandatory part of the contract. So any supplier that is contracted within those 28 lots needs to deliver on this. And I believe, Sarah, in your presentation at the start, you also mentioned as well, how can we actually make sure that the suppliers know what to do and what we mean by this? Here, the Département, they have the social clauses platform, and they also attached to the tender a guidebook. So this activation of social integration clauses. So they actually, together with the tender, they produce material and guidance to help companies deliver on this. Okay, to the next one. Okay, to the next one. And here briefly on the results on this particular construction tenders. You can see here the hours, over 7 hours of employment for the benefit of the targets group that I outlined before, and really having quite a lot of companies involved in this. And so this is also coming back to the start, where I mentioned that public authorities have the power to activate the market and to push them through that. Going to the final example, and this is actually quite interesting also for today's group of participants to look at the city of Dortmund. I found this example, so which is looking at tackling long-term unemployment. Now, the example before looked at integration and included unemployment, but I wanted to get this example to really focus on long-term unemployment specifically. So looking at the city of Dortmund, and I'm really curious to hear maybe a bit more in the discussion from the staff members present today, if you know a bit more about this example or have another perspective on this. Now, from 2017 to 2019, there was a pilot project launched with the objective to create a publicly supported labor market and to use procurement for the creation of new jobs with enterprises that are present in the city already. And also here, they had support from the Service Center for Local Employment. So again, this is quite important here to also identify the skills available and also to have that connection to the local community. And again, they leverage the pre-procurement stage as a tool to raise awareness about their ambitions and yeah, their approach. If you go to the next slide. And in this, they really enabled, or that they took further steps to prevent continued long-term unemployment. So in those 2 years, they succeeded in having 160 long-term unemployed people being placed again into employment through procurement procedures. And by that, I mean, you have so many trickling down benefits, right? In terms of having an additional chance to participate in social life, to also raise awareness about social problems in the city and how the city government can collaborate there. And I'm happy to talk a bit more about the approach, but I think I'm running out of time. So basically, if you go to the next slide, I wanted to briefly point out that ICLEI, we are working on sustainable procurement since 24 years. There's a lot of material there. I'm happy to answer any questions or have a follow-up chat. This is one of our key websites and the resource center. So you can also browse that online. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Josephine, for giving us such a sort of quick overview onto all the different ways that different municipalities are using procurement to address social and equity needs, not just on renewable energy, but in a broad range of sectors. Before we move on to Transport for London, we just have a quick question from Sarah from Pittsburgh. Can you share more about how Rotterdam developed their scoring criteria system for selecting projects, I guess, for their procurement?
Yes, I'm happy to follow up on that. I don't have the details right now, also because they have just awarded the contract, so we've kind of we'll follow up with them soon to get the details of the whole process.
Great, perfect. Then, to kind of get a sort of case example shared directly from a city, I'm happy to introduce Stuart Coates and Sophia Nicola from Transport for London, who's been using their sort of procurement and partnerships to work with suppliers across their supply chain to really create job opportunities to not only just to address the skills shortage that the transport sector is facing, but also to include minority communities as well as increase gender participation in various transport-related careers. So I believe that Stuart and Sophia are with us via phone. If you just want to speak quickly so that we can hear you.
Yeah, we're here in theory. Can you hear us?
Hi.
Yeah, perfect. And my colleague Rebecca will be clicking through your presentation.
Okay, great stuff. So just before we get started, can everyone see our slides then? Because we're dialing in. So
I will give you a heads up. They should be popping up shortly.
Okay. I thought we'd got to grips with all the various kind of virtual meeting systems in the last few weeks, but another one popped up which we weren't able to download on our computer. So.
Yeah, there's always fun surprises. Your presentation is now online.
Okay, good stuff. So yeah, I'll just indicate when we need to flick through the slides, and hopefully we'll be aligned in my screen and yours. So thanks very much everyone for inviting us to talk today. It's been really interesting to hear the various approaches across Europe and to hear about the challenges being faced by the city of Pittsburgh. So Sophia and I sit in Transport for London's supplier skills team, and that's a team that basically looks exclusively at how we can future-proof the skills of the transport industry and the engineering sectors in London, but also kind of the other effects that we were talking about earlier in terms of equality and local economic impact and job creation and that sort of thing. And we do that through the mechanism of procurement, as kind of the previous presentation touched upon a little bit. So we're just going to give you a bit of a background about TFL as a whole overall. the challenges that we're facing in London and pretty much why our team exists, and it's existed for about 10 years now. And then go into sort of the approach that we have to addressing those challenges through procurement, and kind of what our role is as supply skills managers in the supply skills team, and how we really support our supply chain with that kind of collaborative approach that we have with them. So the next slide. Yep, there we go. So just a quick overview of Transport for London. So we sit under the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan's transport strategy. We're responsible for delivering his transport strategy. And that slide just gives you a bit of an overview about what that really means. It's kind of a bit more than just running the underground or the tube. It's the buses, and you can see there we've got rail, trams, the airline, which a certain Boris Johnson brought in when he was mayor, the railway links to outer London, and then it's all the other kind of things that go behind that. So congestion charging, trying to look at our own environmental targets through that. Managing the highways, traffic light systems, cycle hire, taxi licenses, there's even a riverboat service. And then just at the bottom there, the commercial development side of things, we're now kind of a fully self-sufficient transport system, so we don't get any subsidies from the government, although perhaps that might change given the current climate. But so we're looking at things such as advertisement, building flats on our property, commercial rent as kind of alternative revenue streams. So it's quite broad, really, and we do all that through spending around £7 billion a year with, I think it's just under 7,000 active suppliers. So a lot of money being spent, and a real kind of powerful tool that we can look to use to achieve our kind of social, and economic sustainability goals. Just so the next slide then, please. That gives an overview of really the challenges that we're facing in the transport sector. So up to 20% in some areas in terms of skill shortages. The DfT, the Department for Transport, forecasting that by 2020, which we're now there, of around 60,000 people in some areas, which obviously comes with its own sort of wage inflation and increased costs. But also means that really we can plan for sort of investment profiles, but if we haven't got the people to deliver on that, then really we're going to struggle to continue to modernize the transport network like as we want to. The other side of that being also that with London being a very diverse city, I was reading the other day that I think the population is about 43% of London is from a BAME background, a Black, Asian, minority ethnic. So really making sure that we actually represent that diversity from an ethnicity perspective, but also from a gender perspective. Women traditionally very underrepresented in the transport and engineering sectors. So really looking at how we can address that as well and make sure that we are representing that diversity of London in everything that we do. Next slide, please. So that kind of culminated in what is called the Transport Infrastructure Skills Strategy, which is something that the Department for Transport put together back in 2016. And ourselves and other sort of transport clients across the UK are signatories to that. And there's a few commitments in there that go across to those organisations, but also within the supply chains of those organisations. So it's a strong focus on apprenticeship starts, and then also looking at the diversity of those apprenticeship starts. So then basically that's where our supply skills team comes in. So we're responsible for delivering on our supply chain targets as part of this strategy. So we on a quarterly, we have a target to hit 400 apprenticeship starts in our supply chain every year. And we report on that quarterly to the Department for Transport. So basically, next slide, please. Our approach to deliver on that 400 target is to put requirements into the contracts, relevant contracts, to require suppliers to help us to address those challenges, those skill challenges, those diversity challenges. So that slide looks a bit busy, but I'll try and make a bit of sense of it, which might be a bit difficult without having a pointer. But we put what we call strategic labour needs and training as SLNT requirements into relevant contracts, usually upwards of about 10 million. And depending on the nature of the contract, either an infrastructure and construction contracts, which is one output for every 2 million, or services contracts is one output for every £1 million of contract spend. And one output can be kind of a selection of any of those 5 outputs that you can see on the screen there, with an emphasis on apprenticeship starts because of that requirement that we've got to report to the DFT. So you can see there you've got workless job starts is one output, a placement position, so that's hosting a work experience individual. You'll see there that we place a greater emphasis on social mobility placements. You only need 10 days of that to achieve an output, alluding to the fact that we want to try and encourage suppliers to focus on individuals that may come under that definition of social mobility. So that could be things such as qualifying for free school meals, ex-offenders, ex-care leavers, that sort of thing. And we kind of use our discretion when it comes to that in our discussions with suppliers. Then you see apprenticeship starts. So at least 50% of them must be apprenticeship starts. And then school engagement days. So that's going into local schools and colleges and talking about the transport sector, talking about construction and engineering, and that sort of thing. So next slide, please. So that is an overview of the tender process that we follow in order to put these requirements into contracts. So I'll just briefly go through that. So the invitation to tender, I'll work from left to right. So the invitation to tender will go out, and we may deliver briefings to bidders. I think that happens less so now, but I think before, when this was kind of all quite new to people, and it is new depending on the maturity of the supplier, but we may have to give kind of briefings about this kind of thing. And the bidder is basically required to complete what's called a method statement and an activity table. So the activity table will be their proposition based on those suite of outputs that was in the previous slide. What they propose they're going to deliver with that kind of 50% apprenticeship target. And then the method statement is a qualitative report, if you like, on how they will deliver on that. So they might detail their suggested training providers, what apprenticeship frameworks they might use, what relationships they might have in the local area with local charities representing underprivileged individuals and that sort of thing. So that then gets evaluated by our team. Depending on how the tender's put together, that will more often than not be on a pass-fail basis. And then upon contract awards, we will then sit down with the winning contractor to kind of further develop what they bid for and turn that into what we call an implementation plan. So that kind of takes the meat of their bid and really turns it into a plan across the course of that contract, which is then put into the contract. It's contractualized, and then they are basically accountable to then deliver on that, which is a really powerful tool, really, as kind of we spoke about earlier. Having that embedded in the contract really allows us to help kind of push these priorities. And then there's the implementation. Sophia's going to talk a bit about the role of the supplier skills manager after this slide, I think, but how we kind of help our suppliers in delivering on those requirements. And it is kind of that kind of collaborative approach. And then there's that kind of ongoing support, that ongoing regular monitoring. Suppliers then report quarterly to us against the implementation plan, which then we feed back up to the DFT. I think, yeah, that's Sophia's slides now.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the role of the supply skills manager is to work collaboratively with the supply chain to monitor and help them actually deliver their SLNT requirements. So with that, we can assist with access to funding and support from government, and let them know about the various employment and skills programs that are out there. We can also work with them to design and develop a specific program for them and their area of need, interest. And we have a network of referral partners and charities that we work with and have done for a while, where we can provide access to a pool of candidates. So with all of that, sorry, next slide, please. We can work with the with our suppliers to develop pre-employment and work experience programs and actually sort of help them in the running and delivery of those programs. We can do this widespread, or we can work with specific groups if they want to focus on attracting more women into their industry. We can work with organizations such as Women into Construction, or we can do programs focused on just recruiting more women or more BAME candidates, depending on what they are looking to tackle as a business. So the pre-employment program and work experience, usually it's a partnership between TfL, the key suppliers, and the employability groups or charities. The programs are pretty much fit within a 6-week timeline. So it includes an element of pre-employment training, which is usually 2 weeks, that can include any training required for the specific role, or that the supplier will need to then enable the candidate to go out and do around 2 to 4 weeks work placement with them. And what we ask for suppliers is at the end of the program, they offer a guaranteed face-to-face interview or assessment with the candidates that have been on these programs with them. Next slide, please. So we've just done a sort of a summary here of what this program has delivered from 2009 to 2019. So we've supported suppliers to create 5,500 new apprenticeship positions within the supply chain. And specifically in 2018-19, we had 521 supply chain apprenticeship starts. 50% of them was from a black and minority ethnic background. 30% of those candidates were previously unemployed. There was also 100 work placements and 160 days of school engagements, looking to build a pipeline to the future. We also work with our suppliers each year to host an apprenticeship fair where they can, because we find a lot of candidates recognise the TfL branding, but they don't necessarily know or have visibility of all the suppliers that we work with. So we invite them to an apprenticeship recruitment fair, which we hold annually. This year, more than 700 people interested in a career in transportation, engineering or construction attended, which we hold as part of National Apprenticeship Week, which is a big drive done by the government to try and attract and recruit more apprentices. This year we held the event in collaboration with other transport sector bodies, including Heathrow Network Rail, the National Skills Academy for Rail and HS2. It was our biggest fair yet, showcasing more than 500 jobs and apprenticeship. And as well as that, we also included some soft skills workshops and careers advice from our national career services and apprenticeship services. So giving the candidates to find out more about what they were specifically interested in, and the opportunity to go and look at the vacancies on offer, which included anything from engineering, track maintenance, bus driving, customer service, to some office-based roles in HR and project management. And we work with other partners across as well. So that's what we do. Thank you for listening. I think the next slide has mine and Stuart's details if anyone is interested in finding out further information.
Thank you so much, Stuart and Sophia. It was super interesting, and I think that while a lot of the initiatives that you have obviously adapted to the transport sector, I can see that they could be easily replicable for the renewable energy or energy sector in general. Just conscious of the time, and I know that we said that we would leave time for discussion, but we only have, I'd say, about 7 to 10 minutes left. I wanted to ask the audience if there's any burning questions, specifically maybe from Sarah, in terms of something that you would like to ask for on behalf of Pittsburgh.
Thanks. These have been a lot of great presentations. I think it might be easier if I ask kind of just for permission to follow up. I think there's a lot of things that are good and I would like to kind of be able to share with our team. I know specifically some of the procurement things that were mentioned. That's something that is really of interest to a lot of people on our team. And then also, of course, being able to loop in some of our other partners like the Energy Innovation Center, like other departments within city planning, into this conversation and be able to share some of this information with them, I think would be really helpful. So I don't have any kind of quick questions, but I think maybe my question would just be that if we'd be able to follow up with some of these things that may take a little bit more time to discuss than what we have right now.
Sure, of course, Sarah. And also to note that all of these presentations will be shared with the participants, so that you'll be able to go through in detail and follow up by email with any of the presenters. Any other questions from other members of the Alliance?
This is Rebecca. We did have a question from Lisa from Turku on the previous presentation. I think this is a question directed to Josephine about typical barriers that prevent actually local governments of using sustainable public procurement. Maybe Josephine, you could elaborate on this a little bit.
Sure. Yes, of course. I think this is a really important question, actually, one that we get asked a lot. And just to put that as the first answer point, this highly depends on the context, of course. What we do see, though, overarchingly, is that often there is the fear that sustainable procurement means higher cost. And whilst that could apply for upfront higher cost, looking at evaluating cost for the whole life cycle of products and services, it's not the case. However, that's still kind of a predominant fear that a lot of procurers have, because if you talk to procurers, I mean, you have this notion that you have to deliver on the procurement plan and it's taxpayers' money. So of course there is this kind of cost efficiency perspective that does have its place. However, also with public procurement comes this responsibility. And another one to add there, which I find quite interesting as well, is that there's a lack of interdepartmental collaboration. In many public authorities, you have the sustainability unit, maybe the climate change adaptation resilience unit, and the public procurement system is super complex. If it's decentralized, there are sometimes 20 plus teams doing procurement. So bringing that all together and streamlining that is a huge accomplishment. And often the capacity to do that, to have someone who coordinates that is, it's a challenge. Yeah, and needs then, that's what we are seeing, it needs that kind of initial support to establish a sustainable procurement action plan, to establish an interdepartmental working group, and that needs kind of high level commitment to the topic. So having political buy-in, to have high level managers on board pushing for this, those have been kind of mechanisms that we've seen working. And just to close with a third challenge that we often see, or fear, is that when including sustainability aspects, even if it's only in award criteria, so it's not per se mandatory, or won't immediately lead to an exclusion of a bid, that still there is a fear that the market isn't ready yet. So if a public authority goes out asking for specific products or also specific labeling, that there won't be any applications for it because the market can't deliver. And this we've been trying to, or that's kind of one area of activities in ICLEI. We're creating market engagement skills together with public authorities. So to talk to the market, to establish long-term relationships with key suppliers, and to then gather the intelligence, what is and what is not possible yet, to then mitigate that risk of not receiving any bids.
Thank you, Josephine. I think that brings us also back to a question, what you say about a conversation with the market, that was a bit earlier posed by Anja from the DENA, the German Energy Agency, who wanted to ask, I think this goes back to Sarah and maybe Rich, who is involved in Pittsburgh's energy task force, and if there are any policy instruments planned, like who is actually, are you already in conversation with different partners, and how is that working?
Yeah, on our side, from the city side, we do have a number of partners engaged kind of at different levels. We have a number of partners both in the nonprofit, public sector and private sector, as well as within our higher ed, that are all kind of actively working at doing their own renewable projects and some of their own climate related projects. We have what's called the Pittsburgh Climate Initiative. It's kind of a lot of these different partners trying to move forward together on individual projects, whether that be renewables, efficiency, anything else related to kind of climate action. We also then have just kind of an energy specific group. Right now is mostly focused more in the district energy realm. We actually have recently partnered with the city of Aarhus in Denmark around doing this education and kind of development of district energy within the city of Pittsburgh. That energy group, that's a lot of policy people within the city, but then also a lot of kind of technical expertise from universities, as well as then kind of the utility companies, is mostly focused on the district energy piece right now. But I think there's that hope to kind of shift and kind of expand to this larger energy policy conversations as we move forward.
Yeah, just to add briefly to that, you know, we obviously in several different ways support Sarah and the city's efforts, and then independent of that, we actually house a rather large upstream energy technology private equity fund that works to advance the technologies around microgrids, particularly direct current microgrids and smart building, smart city technologies, and the integration in a concept called energy cloud, which would allow streets, neighborhoods, communities, and eventually large cities like Pittsburgh, you know, fairly quickly, but in small bite sizes, convert to a much more carbon neutral, resilient electric grid, and the technologies that support that. So there's also a for-profit component of what we do. We're working closely with a couple other cities right now. Paterson, New Jersey is one of them, as well as Charleston, South Carolina. And some of those advances are happening as we speak. Others will take some time. Some have been delayed because of the COVID outbreak. And you know, it's like any other private capital activity. Some of it will work and some of it won't. But a lot of that's happening at the Energy Innovation Center, along with some major university tech transfer laboratories around microgrids, direct current, and related building and city IoT devices and its integration, as well as battery storage. And these are rapid prototyping university labs. They're not research labs. They attract industry from around the world. Siemens is one of the bigger players in our building to kind of perfect products or to do the final tweaking prior to them hitting the commercial market. So a lot of intersectionality going on in the building that, you know, that we do our best to try to stay abreast of, and sometimes it gets away from us. And we work very closely with Sarah and Grant and the mayor's chiefs of staff to make sure that they're plugged into anything that that they think is important to what they're doing as well. A lot of interesting partnerships come out of that activity.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Rich. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of the time allocated for today's webinar. Just a big thank you to both the City of Pittsburgh, but also to our presenters from Innogy, Transport for London, and ICLEI Europe for sharing their expertise and ideas to kind of answer today's guiding questions, which kind of focused on what partnerships and cooperation models can be harnessed to support a workforce transition that supports local emission reduction goals, and then also to focus on how that workforce transition can be designed in a fair and just way for local communities. Like I mentioned before, all the presentations would be shared after today's webinar, and any follow-ups, of course, very much welcomed via email. And we look forward to keeping in touch with you and also sharing Pittsburgh's progress on this challenge throughout the course of the year. With that, I'd like to say thank you and have a good day or afternoon.